Hello, everybody. Welcome from Rochester, New York. I'm Richard Dolan. This is my wife, Tracy.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. So I just stepped on Tracy's toe just now, and hopefully I didn't break it. How's your foot?
He actually leaned back in his chair to turn the air conditioning down, and then came down with all his force on my
Boom.
foot. So all good. Sorry.
It was an adorable move. It was a great move. Sorry. I'm sorry to you.
All good. We're here. We're ready to go.
We're setting up our microphone.
Yep.
You can see the bottom of the microphone. That makes it nice. So just so you know, welcome. This is episode 5 of Intelligent Disclosure. And we're working on a lot of the bugs in the presentation. Yeah. So I think, I'm going to turn off that
sure.
fan. Okay, I'm going to turn this off.
Without leaning back. Although I have my foot way out of the way.
Yeah, it wasn't my foot that hit her
it was,
open toe. It was my chair leg that came down. Boom. Like 5 seconds before we were ready to do this. So anyway.
I'm recovering with a smile.
My apologies.
So
this is the 5th episode of Intelligent Disclosure. And I've got a lot in store for you. I have a lot planned for tonight. I've given this one a title. In fact, I'm going to give all of them a title from now on. That's my new plan. Last week, if I had had a title for it, it would have had something to do with Hal Puthoff's speech for SSE. This week, I have a theme. I've been working this theme for quite some time, actually for many, many years. And I'm calling it the double-edged sword of disclosure. Earlier this year, I wrote a short little piece about it on that title, and I want to share some thoughts about this with you. Disclosure is one of these things that 10, 15 years ago when I started out in the UFO field, I got dragged into the disclosure conversation. I didn't really initially think that I wanted to get involved in that. I thought, disclosure, totally premature. Let's talk about the UFO cover-up. But anyway, there you go. I'm going to talk about that tonight. Then for the second half, as we've been doing, we'll do some Q&A from you. And that'll give us a chance to do that. You'll also notice that the camera should not shake. Camera should not shake.
We've been working on this.
Rigged that whole thing up. I think we're good.
Yeah.
You'll also notice that the lighting's not too hot, hopefully. If it is, you can be sure to let us know, because you always do. Let us know this time, and I might be able to make an adjustment. But I think we're good to go here. We've got this set up pretty well.
We're rookies, but we're learning.
We don't have producers. I mean, well, we do far away. That's Lori and Michael, which, by the way, Lori and Michael Moriarty, thank you, as always, for what you're doing. That's Pursuing X. It would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to do this without them. Mm-hmm. So thank you, guys. And I think, do we want to do a little update on what we've been up to this week?
Yeah.
Before I get into my little rant.
A couple things. So you can tell them what the status is of the book you are in the process of publishing right now.
Yeah, not writing, publishing. It's not my book, but I am about to publish a book.
You want to
I'll do that right now. So Dr. Bruce Maccabee's done it again. He is a tireless researcher and writer these days. Bruce Maccabee, he's like the age of my mother, and he just keeps going. How he does this, right? He's got another book out. So this is actually, I've gone through every word of it, and it's an outstanding book. It's called Legacy of 1952, Year of the UFO. And Bruce has been researching UFOs since the 1960s, about 50 years. He is probably, without a doubt, one of the most knowledgeable UFO researchers in the world today. In terms of the politics of the UFO cover-up, absolutely one of the most knowledgeable, especially when you get into the early Cold War. He just knows it all. And he's written a book about what is, without a doubt, I think the most powerful year of UFO history is 1952. I think, without a doubt. We forget about it. It's so long ago, we think, who cares about the 1950s? Well, 1952 was important, not just because of the intensity of sightings, the amount that took place, but because of the policies that were put in place as a result of that one year. And Bruce lays it out. So you can go to Richard Dolan Press and learn more about that. I've created a page for the book. The links are not yet live. They will probably be live. Paperback and ebook links will be live tomorrow. That is August 1st. So if you're watching this on YouTube after August 1st, 2018, go to richarddolanpress.com and read up on Bruce Maccabee's excellent book called Legacy of 1952. It is a fabulous book. 120 pages. It's a short book. It's cheap, easy to pick up, and I think you'll learn a lot from it. That's one thing we've done.
That's one. And I thought maybe we could talk about some of the KGRA shows, because you have been discussing how you want to have a global approach and talk to some of the researchers around the world. So maybe starting with Canada, because Ryan Stacey's just came out this week.
I've really been enjoying this. So the Richard Dolan show on KGRA, which also is on this YouTube channel. We get them up every week. I've made it a mission this year and in the coming years to really do some serious outreach with UFO researchers from around the world. I think it's high time, long past due, that researchers begin a serious conversation globally, internationally, and find out what is going on in all parts of the world. We don't do this enough, not even close. So toward that end, what I would love to do is to, when I do complete volume 3 of UFOs in the National Security State, I can tell you it will have a very strong international focus. But until then, what I want to do is have a number of interviews right here on YouTube and on KGRA, in which I'm talking to researchers from around the world. So just this last Monday, last night, on KGRA aired an interview I did with one of the leading Canadian UFO investigators. He's a young guy, but a very, very sharp, dedicated investigator. He's one of the top people in Canada, MUFON Canada, Ryan Stacey. And we had a really interesting conversation about some top Canadian UFO cases of 2017. Really good ones. Go listen to the interview. You'll know what I mean. And then the nuances of what it's like to do a UFO investigation. He had a lot to say about that. Memo: if you are recording a UFO, do not zoom in. Do not crop your image in any way.
And do not edit.
Don't screw with it.
Don't do anything.
Don't screw with the picture. It was very good. But we talked about that. And then he just dropped this bomb at the very end. We had no idea this was coming in the final segment of the program. He talked about a case of a location in a part of Ontario, this kind of a park, like where a residential park, where there were 6 either abductions or bizarre paranormal encounters in this one exact spot over a 2-year period. These people didn't know each other. Excuse me. So I was like, are you serious? I've never heard of anything like this before. And we talked about it. So that's Ryan Stacey. I highly recommend you listen to it. I just interviewed a pre-record. This has not aired yet. One of the top UFO researchers in Hong Kong, part of China. And his name is
also a radio show host.
Chuck Fay. He has a show called MJ13. Very cool guy. Excellent English. Great sense of humor. But mostly, it's important, is super knowledgeable about the UFO subject, and he lives exactly for us on the other side of the world. So it was great talking to him. That will be out on KGRA, and it will be out on YouTube. What else?
Yeah, I just want to say he had a lot of interesting things to say, and he really went into, because we were curious about it, what the difference in ufology was in Hong Kong versus the rest of China, and it's a really interesting discussion that we have with him.
China and Hong Kong. I mean, Hong Kong's part of China now, but of course, until 1997, Hong Kong was not part of China. It was part of the British Commonwealth, and so there's major cultural differences, and he talks a lot about them. In terms of UFO research, not all of those differences are to the advantage of Hong Kong, by the way.
Right.
But that interview will be available before long. It's fascinating. And then there's Gordon.
And I just want to say, all of the interviews we also have, we call them après, after interviews that we post on the member site as well. But
just Gordon, candid stuff, candid conversation.
Yeah, that we have afterwards. Yeah, and then we had Gordon White, who's an Australian,
British
Australian, who also happened to be one of our wedding guests in Uluru, Australia.
He was with us in May of this year in Australia when we got married. He's also brilliant.
He is brilliant. He has an amazing website.
you were reading his book. You had a lot to say about that.
I have his book around here somewhere. His book is called his website's called runesoup.com. His interview will be on in the next couple of weeks as well. So it's fascinating, brilliant man. One of the best writers I've encountered in years.
His book is called Starships.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot the name of it. Not the best title for like such a brilliant book. Starships. I'm just thinking that's like, for considering how amazing his writing is, that's like the most boring title of the book.
Okay, do you want to tell them?
He'll be mad at me, but
do you want to tell them about Göbekli Tepe? Because you had some very interesting things to say about that and how he wrote about that.
Yes, absolutely. So if you don't know what Göbekli Tepe is, it's a place in Turkey, southern Turkey. Arguably the most important archaeological find of our lifetime. Gordon actually in his book said of all time, and maybe he's right. I will say that his writing on Göbekli Tepe is the best that I have ever read. I have never read an analysis that surpasses what he wrote on Göbekli Tepe. It's absolutely just off the charts brilliant. And I was amazed. I'm in awe of his intellect when I read what he has to say. So that will come out, and that's Gordon's book, Starships. And don't love the title, but I love the book.
And so they talked a lot about the book in the interview. So that will be airing on KGRA probably next Monday.
Yeah, I think we'll do that Monday.
And then the Hong Kong interview will be the Monday after?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
You got to line them up.
So that's what's happening on KGRA. And I think that's probably it for...
Well, I think that's it for the interviews. I'm lining up an interview with Dr. Joseph Ferrell. So I think a lot of folks want to hear that interview. I did an interview with Joseph a number of years ago, but you'd think we would really have talked much more than just like one interview.
Yeah.
In all the times that we've been in this public domain, our work is very compatible. We actually really love each other's work. So we approach this phenomenon of UFOs and flying saucers a little differently, but not incompatibly so. And we have a lot to share. So Joseph and I are nailing down an interview date. We're both kind of busy, but I think we'll get that done this month, August. And that'll be out shortly after that, I would imagine. Who else am I lining up here?
Do we want to tell them, or do we want to keep it a surprise?
Is there someone special? I want to know.
There's some very cool people, and we've seen a lot of really great suggestions from people as well, as far as interview ideas. So I think maybe we'll keep the rest under wraps and maybe announce them on the next show.
It's on a need-to-know basis. So there you go.
Okay, so do you want to get started on?
I think so. Yeah, I'm kind of raring to go here.
Okay. So I'm going to leave and probably jump in the chat room. And as we said, Lori and Michael are there from Pursuing X, helping us out. We want to thank them. And you can direct questions at them as well if you want. But enjoy. I'm going to leave Richard to you.
You're going to come back?
And I'll be back.
Please.
Okay.
I always love it when Tracy's here, and I always hate it when she leaves. But she's working, and I'm going to do my work here. So I think it'll work out just fine. So I wanted to talk about something I call the double-edged sword of disclosure. And as I mentioned when I started, when we began this segment here, it's something that I've written about and I've thought about. It's on my website, Richard Dolan Members. I think I can't remember if it's a video or an article or maybe both. But let me put it this way. So the idea of disclosure, the end of secrecy of UFOs, for those of us who have studied this phenomenon, it's important to us. It tends to be important. We think we know there's something important, real going on here, a phenomenon that is so significant, and yet it gets dismissed. It doesn't get dismissed in the popular culture anymore. I mean, if you notice, there's no shortage of information on UFOs on YouTube. It is everywhere you look, and that's the amazing thing. Despite the fact that it being everywhere you look in the cultural scene, it is noticeably absent in the structure of power of our society. And what do I mean? I'm not just talking about the political structure. That's important. And the discussion of UFOs is absent from the public political component of our world. It is not absent from the quiet, behind the scenes political component. Behind the scenes, individuals talk about this, members of Congress talk about it, senators talk about it, presidents talk about it. So it's there, but it just doesn't get discussed publicly. It's thou shalt never discuss it publicly. But there are other institutions and structures of the hierarchy as well, aside from politics. So UFOs are never discussed really seriously or intelligently in the world of academia. Certainly not hardly ever discussed intelligently in the world of academia. It's a shocking thing. It's absolutely shocking. You think about what the academic world is supposed to be. It is supposed to be a world of intellectual discourse. It is supposed to be a world where you can expound on and explore ideas, and where ideas, in a sense, can sort of duke it out in the ring, in the boxing ring of intellect, right? Is this idea better than this idea? Well, let's hash it out. Let's work it out. Ideally, that's what academia should be. It should be the best place in the world for that. And of course, academia is nothing of the sort. Academia is really, in so many ways, a toxic dump. But it is certainly not a place where UFOs are discussed intelligently. So that's a problem. Another element of the hierarchy where UFOs are ignored typically is the news media. The news media today functions essentially as churches did hundreds of years ago. That is, they are the primary guarantor of a proper social discourse. It's not just news media, but the news media plus Hollywood. So it's the entertainment and information media as a unit, because they're all owned by the same institutions anyway. So they are essentially analogous to the church of centuries past. And that's not hype. I'm not hyping this. Media, just as the church is hierarchically centrally controlled. Media, just as the church, has kind of a social agenda that it is absolutely trying to push. And I'm not really going to get into the politics of that this time. We can discuss that another time. I'm not averse to it. I've talked about it many times. But in terms of the UFO subject, it is absolutely true that the commercial establishment media of the entire Western world for the past 70 plus years has been uniformly hostile to the idea that UFOs are anything other than mundane. Now, again, big exception starting last December in the New York Times. Yeah, we've all talked about this. But even with that in mind, the establishment news media, you don't hear on the on news programs or in your local newspaper or in your MSNBC or Fox or whatever, people talking about the reality of UFOs. That doesn't happen. It's not there. So the establishment news media functions as a gatekeeper for what is proper, what are the parameters of what is to be discussed in our society. And that's really what the churches were about hundreds of years ago. That's what the news media has done today. News media wasn't always that way. News media and the media in general, in earlier eras, generations ago, where there were much more independently owned sources of media, it was a little different. All right. But today, the only independent news media is this right here, YouTube, to the extent that they're not being censored by Google, and alternative media. That's it. And fortunately, there's a lot of that. But with the hierarchy, with the establishment, UFOs are out. So when I'm talking about disclosure, where I'm talking about getting the topic of UFOs integrated into our establishment discourse, that's what I mean. And that's going to happen one day. I believe it will happen one day, because I think that this type of change is going to be inevitable, because what's happening from the ground up, from our society, is that this subject of UFOs is actually being spoken about more and more, not less and less. And so it will produce enough cultural change that will eventually, I firmly believe, create a kind of critical mass that will move forward into a political change and an establishment change. But now here's where I talk about the double edge of disclosure. So one edge of disclosure is, let's call it this positive edge. You know, that edge that cuts away at the lies, at the deceptions, at the illusions that have been fostered about ourselves and about our society as a result of this lie. And it's done a lot of bad things to us. Make no mistake. When your society lives a lie as one of the foundations of its very existence, and this is, I mean, consider how important it is that there apparently are other intelligences that are not from here, that are with us interacting with this world and with humanity in ways that, well, we don't fully understand. So that's important, and it is completely off limits to discussion. And so that fact does very unhealthy things to a society. And I am firmly of the opinion that we cannot achieve whatever our destiny is. We're not going to get there if we are living a foundational lie. So the one edge of the disclosure sword, as it were, will slice through many of those negative things that we need it to do. We need that. Last thing I'll say on that before I move to the other side of that sword is that I'm quite convinced that there are problems in our society that are so bad now, so bad, so irredeemably corrupt, that it will only take the significant shock of something really big to change things for the better. And one of those things would be the end of secrecy about the UFO subject. I conceivably see that, because once that secret ends, and now let me get to the other side of that sword, because the other side of that sword of disclosure is the revolutionary side of that sword. And there are a lot of people out there who think, oh yes, revolutions, we need it. Well, I'm not one of those people. Not the kind of revolution that at least I'm thinking about. I don't think we need. So what I foresee is a real danger coming from any kind of radical, dramatic change that happens all at once. So when disclosure does happen, if it happens in a way that comes about as an accident or as something unexpected, let's say a sighting that cannot be denied or a leak that cannot be denied, and the government, the president, is forced to make an admission of some of the significant sort, like this is real, they're here. You can imagine what the repercussions will be. Let me walk you through some of them. Repercussion number one, if you are an aficionado of the UFO subject and you're a believer in the reality of UFOs and you believe that people are just going to handle this in a wonderful way, well, then I think you should consider whether or not you're being very, very naive. Because I do not believe that most people in this world are going to take this news of a UFO reality and of, let us say, extraterrestrials, if that's what they are. I think that that's what they are. If that is the case, I don't think that many people are going to take this as positively as you might think. I think what happens is that at least that a lot of the thought leaders in the UFO community, or a lot of the most outspoken people in the UFO community, tend to have this idea that people will be on board with disclosure and they won't be frightened. They won't have a major problem with it. I don't know about this. We tend to live in our own little bubble. It's very easy to forget that the rest of the world, by and large, doesn't think about this subject. Even if they kind of sort of a little bit believe in UFOs, that's basically what you find. The general public might say, oh yeah, there's probably life out there. Oh yeah, UFOs might be real, but I guarantee you most people don't think that through very well. So it's just this amorphous thought that just sort of hangs there, but most people don't have time to think this stuff through. When you get someone for the first time and they think about this, I'll never forget the reaction. I had a conversation many years ago with another, I was with my kids at a library. They were very young, and there's always other parents around there. And there was another mom with her kid who was the age of my son. And I mentioned to her that, yes, I write about UFOs. And she was at first thinking, oh yeah, it's very interesting. And I went on for about 5 minutes on whatever it was that I said, and I saw the fear in her eyes. And I could see she didn't really want to talk about this anymore. And that was the end of that conversation. So there's a lot of that out there, I think. So that's one element of it. And maybe that's to be expected, and there's no way around it. When you have a great change, it's going to upset a lot of people. But then let's get into some of the other elements of disclosure. Disclosure is going to ramp up, the any kind of anger, distrust that people have about government structures. Well, you think it's big now, it's going to be 10 times that or more post-disclosure. And again, maybe that's necessary. It will be necessary to do some real house cleaning within the deep corruption that exists within the national security apparatus of this society. No question about it. But don't think it's going to come all peacefully. There's going to be a lot of ruckus, a lot of dissension that happens. My biggest fear is a scenario out of something like Hotel Rwanda, or what actually happened to the nation of Rwanda in the 1990s. If you don't know what I'm referring to, go watch the movie Hotel Rwanda, and you see a very well, a very kind of clear example of what happens, of how a society unravels right before your eyes. In the beginning of that movie, of that story, you see a society where neighbors get along and it functions. And you see what happens when people are at each other's throats. And don't think it cannot happen in your society. It can happen anywhere. And so this is to be concerned about. The biggest concern I have with the unsettling elements of disclosure are those individuals who will become stridently revolutionary in one way or another. And again, don't think it can't happen. Revolutionary people, utopians, these are not people that I have ever supported. And there's a lot of utopians in the UFO cultural community, all too many. People who really honestly believe that we can create some kind of perfect human society. And all we need to do is have disclosure, have the truth about UFOs open for all, and we'll have an instantly better world. We'll make the deserts bloom, Stephen Greer once said about, releasing the hidden technologies to the world. Well, actually, you're not going to make the deserts bloom just because you can get water to the desert. Creating viable topsoil takes centuries, if not more. So it's going to take a little bit more than water. But the point is, there's no easy, quick fix to our society's ills, not even disclosure. For me, disclosure is a necessary step, not a final step toward really cleansing ourselves of one particular egregious lie. It is a bad lie. It has kept us in a kind of unnatural wheel spinning state for a long, long time, for an entire human lifetime. So it needs to, the secrecy on UFOs needs to end. It has contributed mightily to a black budget culture that has eroded the foundations, not simply of American society, which it has certainly done, but really global society. So let me explain that a little bit better. We talk about the black budget. We talk about secrecy, missing money from our society, and there's a great deal of that. One thing that analysts need to understand is how the UFO secret is an integral part of the development of this black budget culture. Again, I've talked about this before, but it's critical to understand that the UFO secret is one of the original creators of what we will call our black budget civilization. And that has really taken the United States right off the rails in what its mission really has been and could still be, that of a free republic in which individuals have the right to question their government and to control their government and have information of their government about what's going on. By having a black budget, the public loses that transparency, and it affects the world. Because as America goes, we're the most powerful economy, the most powerful military, really the most powerful nation, so goes much of the world. And when America goes off the rails, the rest of the world is going to go off the rails too. Very likely, much of it will. It's so disclosure would potentially remedy that. But let me just say, it wouldn't necessarily remedy that. There's a total possibility of what we might call a fascist form of disclosure, or a completely government-controlled form of disclosure. And since we're moving in a world, and there's no question in my mind about this, that is moving, lurching every year toward a totalitarian surveillance nightmare, fascism, for lack of a better word, then it is entirely possible that a disclosure can come in a way that advances that agenda rather than impedes it. So the real question is, who's going to be in control of this disclosure process? This is why it is absolutely necessary for people like you, like us, to be vocal, to be smart, to be analytical, and to be brave about what is going on in this world. I really think that analysis and bravery are really the two, and ethics. Analysis, ethics, and bravery are what we really need. And if you're willing to look at your world clearly, if you're willing to be brave, and if you're willing to be good, you can go a long way and be an inspiration for other people. It is imperative that the people, not the state, be directing and pushing this disclosure process. Because what's really likely to happen is, eventually it will happen that governments will be comfortable enough with their mastery over the public narrative that they will then, in their own way, roll out a disclosure narrative that will suit their interests. And as I often like to quote the CIA director, Alan Dulles, I think it was Alan Dulles, the best way to keep a secret is to pretend to share it. And so we can get that type of disclosure as a beginning, but we have to make sure that every form of disclosure is going to be self-serving. And if a government narrative takes control over this, then, well, it's our job to investigate properly and to make sure that what is said is true and accurate and not full of spin and self-serving deception. So disclosure, it's important, but it's not the one size fits all, and it doesn't fix everything. Disclosure is not going to create utopia. Disclosure might not even create a better world in the immediate term. It is likely to create a better world in the long term, and it might create a better world in the immediate term also. It all depends on who's doing the disclosing and how it's coming out. So that's sort of what I was planning to say. Before I did this with you, I was looking at some notes, and then I thought, the hell with it. I'm just going to talk with you from the heart, as it were. And I think that I said everything that I want to say, and I think it might be a good idea to bring Tracy back here, and we can do a little bit of questions and answers. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
You want to come over here?
Bring this in.
So here comes Tracy. If I think of another thought on disclosure, I will probably toss it out there.
Okay.
One other thing I want to say before we do Q&A is what I plan to do every week is have one theme. And it's not always going to be disclosure. It's not always going to be any one thing. I want to mix it up. So one theme might very well be abductions. One theme might be a particular UFO case that I want to explore. One theme might be deep state politics or false flags. I want to keep reminding you, those of you who want me only to talk about UFOs, that may not always happen. You have to understand, long before I was a UFO researcher, I've been a lifelong student of geopolitics. That's never stopped. Since I was 15 years old, I've been studying that. And that will never leave me. I've done a great deal of research into false flags. I do a great deal of research into what we might call parapolitics or deep politics, and I've been doing that for a long time. So not every analysis that I give you is going to be a UFO theme for the first 30 minutes of this program. Many of them will be, because I'm very interested in that, but not everyone will be. So keep that in mind, please.
So you're going to announce that theme, though. That's what you were saying, right?
Yeah, my goal is to announce every theme beforehand, as I did with today's program.
But we'll always try and get some questions in as well. So we've been collecting some, and hi to everybody who's just joining us. I know some people are just coming in. So just something for fun to start with. So have you seen the Project Blue Book trailer?
Oh, yes. So I have. I forget the name of that actor, the Game of Thrones Littlefinger dude. I forget. My son knows his name.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
So yes, I have heard a number of people said, "Wow, you look just like him. He looks like you." The really frightening thing is that means I might look like J. Allen Hynek, and if that's the case, then I know what I'm going to be looking like when I'm a little bit older. And I'm not sure how I feel about that, to be honest with you, because he plays J. Allen Hynek for the Blue Show, and then I look a little. That's on Richard Dolan Press. If you go there. Go to articles, you'll see it. I was kind of critical of Hynek. There's a tendency in our world to deify people, especially once they die. Remember that during his very, very severe 1966, did a press conference in which he brought out the famous phrase of swamp gas and made himself and Blue Book look really, really foolish. I think at that moment, Hynek thought, I don't want to get on this pony anymore. And so he started a public turnaround and began to have a much more of a pro-extraterrestrial hypothesis. But anyway, having said all of that, the trailer looked interesting, and the show's not out, is it?
No, I don't think so. I think it's
so
coming up.
Yeah, I'll look forward to seeing it.
Okay, well, I'm glad that was a nice light one, because according to the chat and everyone letting us know, I think we just crashed during the answer to that question. So it looks like we're back up.
Oh, that's no good.
Hopefully in the feed playback, it will still be okay. So let's hope for that. All right, so let's...
if it doesn't survive in the playback, then I promise I'll give that answer again. But I don't want to repeat it tonight.
Okay.
There's no point.
So, so somebody else asked about, what's up with Jacques Vallée? Where is he? And another person said, can't find any information on Jacques Vallée's ultra-terrestrial theory. Can you enlighten us?
Well, I don't know what Jacques Vallée is up to these days. Vallée, of course, is one of the most famous UFO researchers. And if you don't know who Jacques Vallée was, you can look him up. But I don't know what he's been up to the last couple of years. I met Vallée once. He's a brilliant man and one of the most significant intellectuals that this field's ever had. His idea, this person writes ultra-terrestrials. Let's just say Vallée, back as far back as the 60s and the 1970s, was introducing ideas about UFOs that were not of the extraterrestrial variety. Vallée, another person who did this back then was John Keel. There's a lot of people currently who do this as well. They're not, Vallée's not the only one. So this idea of ultra-terrestrials, that's just one phrase, and I don't even think that's Vallée's. Actually, I think that's Keel's. But what is the idea? I mean, the idea is very simple. It's that this phenomenon seems a little bit too strange to be reflected simply by extraterrestrials coming from another planet or planets. So there's something that reflects what's called the high strangeness that often affects the UFO experience. This thing they've been called high strangeness for 50 years now. And because it's this recognition that when someone encounters a UFO, frequently odd things happen, whether there's missing time or time seems to move differently, or their mental acuity seems to change, or their emotions get totally out of whack, or any number of other things happen that are odd. That just seem very odd. And so, Vallée is thinking 40 plus years ago about this, that, well, is it really that we're dealing with extraterrestrials, or are we dealing with something beyond that? some other dimensional type of entity. So this idea has been out there for a long, long time. And that's the idea. And is it right or is it not right? Well, we mentioned Gordon White earlier, who I interviewed, and you will hear that. And Gordon's fascinating because I did an interview with him, actually. And if you go to runesoup.com, that interview that I did with him is there, where we talk about the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And, Gordon, I don't think really believes in a straightforward ETH. And it's interesting because I find that I'm often associated with the ETH myself. And I guess that's accurate. I believe in the extraterrestrial hypothesis, but I don't believe in like a 1950s version of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. In other words, I don't believe that this phenomenon is simply men and women from another planet landing in their metal spaceships with maybe their robots. I don't think it works like that. So these other beings have technology that is so radically advanced. And part of that includes, I strongly suspect, an ability to manipulate what we would call space-time, our physics. So that what it does is it gives this sense of interdimensionality, that they can enter and leave our existence or our world at will, in ways that, as I've often thought about it, like we can enter and leave a fish pond at will, and the fish have no idea who just came in there and left and where they went, because, well, they're fish. Our pond is this space-time reality that we live within. And if there are other beings from wherever who have the ability to master space-time technology, then they're sure as hell going to seem interdimensional. And I think a contemporary extraterrestrial hypothesis really needs to incorporate that, as well as a number of other factors to bring it really up to date. In fact, I've given a lecture on this very, very theory, and I intend, before this year is out, to put together a booklet on this theme. I think it's high time that I get that thing done. So it's a fascinating subject to compare the modern version of the ETH with all of these other competing theories as to what we're dealing with.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you, you guys, for your super chats, and thank you. Everyone has amazing comments and amazing questions. They are being collected for us.
Thank you.
Want to thank Christine again for your super chats, and Ellis.
Have we met her?
And Kelly. I'm not sure, but
all right.
You are such an amazing supporter. Just want to thank you. And Glenn, thank you for your super chat as well.
I want all of you to know, and thank you. When we travel, we do conferences in many different places. And I really would encourage, those of you who participate in these chats or who are members of our richardolanmembers.com, please find us. We're always interested in talking with people who want to support what we do. So it means a lot to us, and I just want to thank you.
So I want to just acknowledge something here and then go to a question, because we keep getting asked about audiobooks. Someone said they listened to Mike Clelland's audiobook of The Messenger. Actually, I believe it was the second book he released.
Stories from the Messengers, yeah. Stories
from the Messengers, and loved it, and was wondering if you are going to do audiobooks. I've been saying this forever.
Yeah. Okay, so here's I'm glad you mentioned this.
I'm pro audiobook.
I'm pro audiobook too. The thing is, so if I were to read my own audiobook, I can tell you that's a lot of work. Yeah. People think, oh, how much can it be? You're just reading your book. Well, try doing it sometime. So you've got to get in front of a microphone like this, and it would take at least a month, probably more. Now I can do it. Yeah. But I would have to put everything else aside.
There is a lot going on, and we've talked about this many times. And I know for myself, I probably would want to hear you. Your voice is very unique. You read it. So I guess, if you want to give feedback on that, if people think that it would be okay to have someone else read his book, but I think we have been of the opinion that a lot of people would want you to read it, and we've just been putting it off because it is very time consuming.
I would like to read it. Like I would like to do an audio version of UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. I think that would be the ideal book for me to read. Yes. I think like if there's one audio book, that would be the one I would like to do.
Yeah.
And it is a dream to get it done. I'll just do that in my spare time, or I'm joking.
Yeah.
Or we could hire someone and just have them do it.
Yeah, it just wouldn't be Richard's voice. Don't you have After Disclosure in audio form?
Oh yeah,
is that available?
It is. Yeah,
Okay.
After Disclosure does exist as an audiobook. And the reason is because I'm not the publisher of After Disclosure anymore. I did originally self-publish it. My co-author, Bryce Abel, and I made the call to go to a larger publisher after the first year of that book. And because they have resources that I don't have, were able to create a nice audiobook read by a pretty good voice actor. So that one exists. If you want an audiobook, you can check out After Disclosure. But to do 21st Century Mind is the dream. I would love to do that. UFOs in the National Security State, those books would kill me if I had to read those. That's a lot. I don't know if that'll happen.
Okay, so next question. This is from Ellis. Are Men in Black ET or CIA? What do you think? I know you just did an interview with Nick Redfern very recently, and I think it's up on our YouTube channel.
Yes, it is.
About this.
Yeah, I'm going to defer to Nick on this. Nick's written 5 books on the MIB phenomenon. There's no one in the world, at least in the research field, who knows this subject better than Nick does. And I asked him this very question, so I'm glad you're asking me. And I can only repeat what Nick said. Essentially, it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. So there are MIB cases that very clearly seem to be human. And his speculation is simply that these are intelligence operatives who are working off of the lore, working off of the legend of the Men in Black, and maybe having some fun with it themselves, I think was his suspicion. But there are other cases, and Nick really stressed this, right? Because you were listening to this as well, where these Men in Black are not normal. They're very pasty. They're very sometimes robotic in their mannerisms, right?
Yeah, they look ill. They look almost sort of zombie-ish.
Right.
They act strange. They seem to not come in unless invited, which he makes fun of, but that's just a trait. There's also a really weird smell that's associated with this particular type that he's sort of categorizing separately from the ones that he thinks are human.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that I asked him as well is how current are Men in Black reports? Because when we hear about the Men in Black, we hear about the 1950s and 60s. Are there current Men in Black cases that he was encountering? And the answer is yes, there are. So, but I will say, like, my take on those was that some of them seemed a little less tangible. Like a couple of them almost seemed dreamlike to me. Do you recall this? They didn't quite. I didn't know what to make of some of those.
I think he has one major story where they were appearing in someone's bedroom at the end of his bed, and it was happening every time at night. Bender? Is his name Bender?
Oh, well, that's an old case. That's Albert Bender from the 1950s. That's one of the primordial cases of the Men in Black. But good that you remember that one. But there are contemporary cases, and it's an interesting phenomenon and what it means. Like, one of the things that I asked too was I don't really understand the logic of the Men in Black anymore. Like, what's the point? Are you going to like frighten someone from reporting a UFO? Like, seriously? This is 2018. This isn't 1950. It's not like, oh my God, you can't report a UFO. My God, civilization, the house of cards will come down. Like, no one cares. If you have an abduction experience, like, who really cares anymore? There's thousands of abduction cases that are out there. So throw this one in the pile. It's not like, here come the Men in Black to frighten you away. Like, I don't really understand that part of the phenomenon, to be honest. And I'm not really sure, even after going over that with Nick, that I really was satisfied that I understand why this phenomenon's happening.
Did you, I can't remember, but did you talk about, is it mainly intimidating people, or is there anything else? I'm thinking of, we watched the show Fringe. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that TV series, but it's amazing. And
Fringe was good.
They sort of have Men in Black, but they are observers of humanity, and they live outside of space-time. they're really interesting. So I was always wondering if there was sort of some other angle other than intimidating people.
Well, in the UFO lore,
did he speak about that?
No, they're mostly
Intimidating
it's kind
people.
of an intimidation thing. Yeah,
Okay.
That's what I think. So hopefully that was a reasonable answer. Thanks for asking.
Okay, so we've had a couple times last week, this week, Bob Lazar. Would you interview Bob Lazar, and can you speak a little bit about Bob Lazar? Just
Yes.
a quick.
Yeah, I'll do this quick. I would absolutely interview Bob Lazar if I had the chance. I did meet Bob Lazar on one occasion, and that's a funny story, and I'll spare you the details, but it was very brief, and I was very glad to meet him, and I think we enjoyed meeting each other. I wrote about 10 pages or so on Lazar in volume 2 of UFOs in the National Security State. I spent a lot of time really researching Lazar's story. Excuse me. So if thumbnail version of Lazar in the late 1980s claimed to have worked just south of Area 51 on alien technology and alien flying saucers, classic flying saucers, too small for a human being to get in. So, and then he comes out, George Knapp, journalist out of Las Vegas, interviews Lazar. Stanton Friedman comes out and says Lazar is a fraud. He lied about his education. Love Stan, don't agree with him on this at all. Not at all. I think Bob Lazar is absolutely truthful. Absolutely truthful. I don't even qualify it anymore. You know, for years I caught a lot of grief from a few other people in the UFO field who just were convinced that Bob Lazar was a liar. And all I kept saying was, look, I have read and reread, honestly, I think every single statement that guy made in the early 1990s, because he was interviewed quite a lot at that time. And I found Lazar to be absolutely 100% consistent every step of the way. He never elaborated, he never speculated, he never went beyond what he absolutely knew. And he was always just very low-key about the whole thing. He always struck me as someone who just said what he wanted to say, and that was the end of it, you believe him or not. George Knapp did a fair amount of investigation into Lazar's background, and really everything about Lazar checked out, including the Los Alamos connection where Lazar worked in the early 1980s. And I would say almost absolutely certainly the Edward Teller connection. That's very important. If you don't know who Edward Teller is, Lazar had a communication with Teller on one occasion. And then the other thing that I've never forgotten from George Knapp is, you know, following the Lazar story, Knapp has always continued, whenever the opportunity permits, to continue investigating Groom Lake, Area 51, and that whole area. And he's interviewed by now, I think, 25 or 30 different insiders from that secret place. And what George has always said is all of them, in one way or another, corroborate one aspect or another of Bob Lazar's original story. So I think Lazar is telling the truth, and I would love to interview him. By the way, there was a lecture he gave back in, I think it was for Open Minds in Phoenix. I was there, and this is where I met him, 2013, 2014, or 2015. Why can I not remember these things anymore? The years fly by. But his lecture was excellent, and it might be available somewhere. If it is, you can look for it, and it's worth listening to.
Okay. I'm going to get another question for you, but in the meantime, I just want you to very quickly address something for people. Some people have been asking, you know, would you be interested in publishing a graphic novel? They have they have a book that they would like you to have a look at. So where do things stand with you in terms of accepting books to check out? How do you feel about that? Do you want to just address that for everybody?
Thank you. And thanks for the question. So I do publish books. I have a company called Dolan Press. Not very big, but it does what it does. I publish books by about a dozen authors or so, and I'm proud of them. Publishing books is it's a bit time consuming in more ways than one. And I don't do it lightly. I've been wondering over the last couple of years whether I really want to do publishing as a full-time venture, or if there are better ways of me to spend my time. I would really rather be focusing on doing intellectual work. This counts as intellectual work. Doing live video counts. Writing books is intellectual work. Publishing other people's books, I'm not sure. Having said that, yes, I will continue to look at other submissions. The thing is, it's got to have quality, and I don't know how to define that for you. But I'm not going to publish a book that's of questionable quality. I passed on William Tompkins' book that has sold many, many, many copies, Selected by Extraterrestrials. I was offered the opportunity initially to be the publisher of that book, and I was excited to look at it before I knew what was in it, because I thought this is a powerful potential whistleblower who is connected to the U.S. Navy. Heck yes, I'll absolutely look at it. And once I read the book, I was like, absolutely no way in hell will I ever publish this book. Not ever. I don't care how much money it makes. And it's made a lot of money. If I were publishing that book, it would probably be the biggest seller that we have. But I don't care. I'm not going to publish a book if I think it lacks truth value or integrity or quality of writing. So if you're going to send me a book, I want it to be good. I want it to be interesting. Graphic novel? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I would publish a graphic novel if it were good, if it engaged me. You know, it's got to be interesting. And I don't know how to quantify that. But there is this thing. It's quality. It's there. It really exists. And I want to be proud of the books I publish. So I'll consider it, but I'm selective now. Maybe at most one a year by other authors, you know. Okay. I'm not really. I did Stories from the Messengers earlier this year by Mike Clelland. I'm doing Bruce Maccabee's 1952 book this year. And I don't think I'm doing any other authors other than myself this year. So, but having said that, give it a shot, write to me, and we'll see what happens.
So would you advise that they give a one-page synopsis maybe first? Just because of time limitations?
This is why she's here.
Honestly, people sometimes will send their scripts, and it's just a matter of time. I see he just can't get around to reading them. So whatever you can do to give him a one-page synopsis and as much information as you can.
Yeah, it helps.
Would be your best chance at making to the next level and him, you know, clearing off some things to be able to read that. So
someone just sent us a book yesterday in the mail to both of us. It's a lot to read.
It is a lot to read.
And
so
it's tough.
Yeah. Or even like, an introduction letter where you explain your angle and what it's about would be the best thing to do.
Let's move on.
So, okay.
That was good though.
Okay, so can you interview Dan Burisch? I don't actually know how you say Dan's last name.
You said it's Burisch, yeah.
And talk about the Ambassador Suite and the Project Looking Glass.
Okay. So this is the great thing about this show, because some of the questions we agree on beforehand and some just get sprung like this one. So I did meet Dan Burisch over a decade ago when he was a little more visible in this field. Dan Burisch is a whistleblower, or we could say an alleged whistleblower. There's a lot of controversy about him. I myself, I don't know what to think about Dan Burisch, to be perfectly honest. Like when I've listened to him speak, he's allegedly a biologist who has done analysis of extraterrestrial bodies, and beyond that is allegedly had communication with one particular alien known as J-Rod. George Knapp, who is the guy who's, researched Bob Lazar, has famously said he believes Burisch is a faker. So does that mean George Knapp is right? I don't know. Honestly, I've always found Burisch interesting. I've always found what he has to say interesting. But the fact is, I've never been able to verify. My old friend Ron Garner, who's no longer alive, was probably the biggest supporter of Dan Burisch that anyone had. And I have a lot of Burisch material. I just don't know what to think of it. Project Looking Glass. There's been a lot of cases talk about Looking Glass. That was something that I think, if I'm not mistaken, Lazar had heard about, or Bill Cooper back in the late 80s. And off the top of my head, I'm trying to remember what Looking Glass was. I think it was either a time travel program or some kind of space-time manipulation program. And I've never gotten a detailed confirmation of that, so I don't know what to think of it.
Okay, next question. Does Richard think there's an element of the breakaway civilization? Wait a sec. Does Richard think that an element of the breakaway civilization have already broken away with the technology, and that ATIP and other projects are monitoring them?
Oh, I love that question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the way that I envision our national security apparatus is that of a labyrinth. So you remember in ancient mythology, a labyrinth is this intricate maze. And there's a certain labyrinthian quality to our national security apparatus, combined with just all types of groups splintered and doing their own thing potentially. Within the federal government apparatus, there's definitely, I think, an attempt over the last generation to consolidate that apparatus, particularly post 9/11. You see this increasingly in the formal federal structure. But the problem with that is that you've got this black budget culture that has never ceased to exist. In fact, it's gotten stronger. And a lot of that black budget culture is privatized. It's corporate. It's backed by huge money and banking money frequently. So in other words, these private contractors will get federal money, and they'll get a lot of private money as well to engage in activities that are ultra secret, that are impervious to the public looking in at them. And this is where you get a breakaway civilization. And so there's a story from the late 1990s from dealing with the late astronaut Edgar Mitchell and Stephen Greer. This is a story that I know is true. In 1997, Greer and Mitchell were in D.C. and made an arrangement to meet with people in Washington, D.C., to let them know about rogue programs in the black budget world that were beyond the control of the official establishment. So they had one meeting with a man named Admiral Thomas R. Wilson. And I know this. I spoke with Wilson on one occasion about this, and he got so angry he hung up on me. But this is a true meeting. So Greer and Mitchell are with Wilson, and essentially they talk about the existence of these deep black programs that are beyond the purview of formal government oversight. And these programs had to do with extraterrestrial technology and bodies. All right. So Wilson says, I'll look into it. And this is something I got at the highest level of an insider who knew everything that had happened. Wilson knocked on a bunch of doors, and after a few months, got an answer to the program do these extraterrestrial programs exist? Now, Wilson's position, by the way, was head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So he was very high up in the Pentagon, right? He's an admiral. And if you're head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, one would think you might be privy to these types of programs. Well, guess what? Wilson knocked on one door, and the lawyers from this black budget program meet with him, not even the managers, the lawyers. And the only thing they were willing to talk with him about was not to give him any information about these programs, but simply to find out how he learned about the program, because he had no need to know. And that was it. And they essentially said, you're out of this program. You have nothing to do with this. Wilson, in an interview with someone about this, commented explicitly about how this technology was not made by human hands, was his words. And I know because I read that transcript, and I know that transcript is true. So here's my point. ATIP, breakaway civilization. I don't think that ATIP would have been tasked with monitoring the broken away parts of the breakaway civilization, but it is entirely possible that ATIP's purview would have included monitoring those craft as part of its mission. You know what I mean? It's like, was the Tic Tac UFO, for instance, by the way, that sighting preceded the formation of ATIP by a couple of years, but was that UFO something we made or something we didn't make? I think the consensus is that we didn't make that one. But are there craft that we have made that ATIP would have noted? It's entirely possible. My vision of how the system is now is you have the official military with their technology. You have the official classified military with their technology. Then you have the splinter groups, the breakaway groups, of which there very well may be more than one, and of different nationalities. What do the Russians have? What do the Chinese have, for example? Your guess is as good as mine. And then you've got these other beings. So I think that there are different factions involved. And it would be really nice to have a scorecard to tell all of them apart. And I'm not sure if anyone really truly has an accurate scorecard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to say thank you to Glenn again. And we just heard from our people that we have your email. So thank you very much. And he sent something about Men in Black. Also, Talon 0863. Thank you so much.
I will answer that one. That's Cooper, not Copper, but I'll answer that one.
Okay, you want to do that? Go
yeah,
for
Bill
it.
Cooper, good guy or bad guy? That's from Richie Gray. I think Cooper, I never met him, so I'll just say that. I think Cooper was definitely a troubled man. I do know that in the early years when he was making the rounds in the late 80s, a lot of people really liked him. They were impressed by him. They thought he was very respectful and accurate and so on. And I also have come to understand that he was unstable in a lot of ways psychologically, was prone to getting violent when he would drink. Just have to say it, it's true. And the thing that I noticed about Cooper, and I wrote about Cooper for a few pages in volume 2 of National Security State. I think he had this, he was ahead of his time in one important way, like a really important way. Here he is in 1989 talking about the power behind the scenes, like the Bilderberger groups and the Jasons and these other secret societies. And I can just say, like in 1989, I don't think anyone in the UFO field was talking about secret societies and the significance that they had in the behind-the-scenes structure of power. And I think Cooper was spot on with that analysis, and that's important. It's also true, though, that I think Cooper had this amazing ability to believe his own lies. And I don't mean to be trash-talking anyone here, but this has to be said. So Cooper comes out in the late 1980s with the statement that while he was in the U.S. Navy, saw a UFO rise out of the water with his Navy seamen out in the ocean. It was an amazing story, and he seemed very believable. And this story could very well be true, for all I know. But then he starts becoming this cult-like guru out of the blue, and immediately starts taking on stories that were sent by someone else to John Lear, with whom Cooper was in communication. Stories about the Kennedy assassination, that the driver was the guy who shot Kennedy. Well, I can tell you right now that the guy who wondered about this was a Dutch filmmaker, Lars, I can't remember his last name. He was working on a Kennedy assassination documentary, and he had like a 5th generation Zapruder film that was so, remember, this is the 1980s. It was such a bad quality film. It looked maybe like in that one that the driver actually shot Kennedy. So he was exploring this, sent a copy of that to John Lear, hoping to get funding because he thought Lear had money, which was not true. Lear sends this just on a lark along with a bunch of other things to Cooper. Cooper devours it and immediately starts talking about how when he was in the military, he was briefed on the Kennedy assassination and how the driver shot Kennedy. Well, that's just not true. Like a clear analysis of the video, digital clear analysis shows, I think without a doubt, that it was not the driver who shot John F. Kennedy. So Cooper was just full of it. But he was adamant. There's a lot of other stories I could relate. I'll pass. I wrote about them in volume 2 of UFOs in the National Security State. If you're interested, you can go check that out.
Okay. So many people have been asking this. I know what you're going to say. So what did you think of Elizondo's presentation at MUFON Symposium? I'll just say, did you see it?
Oh, no. So I wasn't.
Yeah.
the MUFON symposium. We were not there.
Yeah, a lot of people have been asking, so I just wanted to address it.
I'm curious what the word is. Have you heard?
I haven't heard yet either. So yeah, very curious about that.
Can't comment.
Yeah, sorry about that. What do you think of Travis Walton?
Oh, well, I've known Travis Walton for many years. Travis is absolute stand-up guy. On many occasions, I have spent a lot of alone time with Travis Walton, including a drive across the state of Pennsylvania for about 6 hours alone in the car with him. And we just talked about life and UFOs and everything else that mattered. On top of that, I've just spent a tremendous amount of time with that man. And so you have now.
Yeah.
Travis is as honest as the day is long. He's a genuinely sensitive, intelligent guy who I have to just say is like he's one of the best representatives that if you want to believe in the UFO phenomenon and you want good people in the field, he's an A-level person. He's that good. There's no question. I mean, he passed I think 3 polygraphs. There was one that supposedly he didn't pass. I wrote about that at length, again, in Volume 2 of National Security State. I wrote a lot about his case back then. That was absolutely ridiculous. He had a hostile interrogator right from the get-go, and I mean, I have the transcript of that. It's astonishingly unprofessional that was done against Travis. And Travis was 22 years old when this thing happened to him, this abduction, where he was missing for 5 days. And it's not like he was asking for it. He didn't want it to happen. And I think he just, I mean, I think he enjoys his life now because he's met a lot of really good people as a result of his experience. And I think he likes the world that he's in. But I know for many years, his strongest wish was that this abduction experience had never happened to him. So I think he's absolutely honest, 100%. Yeah.
I always use that case I mean, we all have people in our lives, I'm sure. Someone actually brought this up who, we'll talk to our friends, and you have the people who think you're absolutely crazy. They think this, they don't even consider this as serious remotely. I always use Travis's case, and encourage them to watch that story because there's so many people involved. The polygraphs were involved. It was highly publicized, highly documented. There's been a documentary, Jen Stein's documentary
called Travis. It's a very excellent documentary.
And I find it really interesting how he's really changed his outlook on what happened. Originally it was sort of this.
He saw it in a more negative way.
Yeah. And he's really reframed it.
Well, he now believes that they saved his life. So that's his opinion. It is possible that he was missing for 5 days. And there's he can only remember about 90 minutes worth of his actual being taken. So I think there's a good chance that he was either severely unconscious or he believes dead, maybe. There were a couple of times when he was regressed to try to get to the bottom of it. And they had to call off the regression because the fear was that he would actually have a heart attack. He was so terrified. It's the one thing he said about the movie. Like in many ways, the movie Fire in the Sky was not accurate, the abduction part. But he said what was absolutely accurate was the level of terror that the movie portrayed. And he wasn't, it portrayed like him being wrapped with cellophane around his face.
I think he actually had a bubble of didn't he have a bubble of water or something over his face? Like it was so that he was saying that wasn't what actually happened, but it was the suffocating feeling that was real, right?
He said it captured the feeling very well.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll just say about Travis is he's so painfully polite. Like he will never say a bad thing to anyone. I remember one time I was at an event with him and the day was basically over. It was like 7 o'clock at night and everyone was exhausted and we were going to get some dinner and I wanted to get Travis and he was sitting at his table and there was a person looming over him just talking about whatever he was. And poor Travis was just wilting and he wouldn't say like, I have to go. And I went and grabbed him and just said, sorry, it's over. You got to go. So Travis is incredibly painfully polite.
What do you think of Skinwalker Ranch?
Oh, this was going to be a question last week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it did come up last week. Yeah.
Well, this is a place that was once owned by Robert Bigelow in the state of Utah. Skinwalker is an ancient Native American term for these beings that are not from here. And the Skinwalker Ranch is believed, at least by a number of scientists who studied it, paid for by Robert Bigelow, to be like a portal of some sort, where UFOs have been seen a tremendous amount, where strange creatures have been seen, where poltergeist type activity has been seen. Colm Kelleher and George Knapp wrote a book on this, The Hunt for the Skinwalker. Colm Kelleher is an extremely capable scientist. He was Bigelow's lead scientist for many years. Kelleher and a number of other scientists were trying to do explicit, exact scientific measurements of what was going on at the Skinwalker Ranch, and what they found was just extraordinary. So I think that there's a lot of evidence to show that there's a very genuine, strange place. And the Bigelow connection is interesting. You think about a guy like Robert Bigelow. So 25 years ago, he was funding an abduction conference that brought John Mack into prominence in Harvard University in the early 90s. In the late 1990s, he founds the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, which was the group that was basically monitoring the Skinwalker Ranch, that was studying black triangles. I mean, Bigelow threw himself into deep study of UFOs for years and years. Then he makes an arrangement with MUFON in the 21st century to get access to their current reports, and that whole thing went south, and they started sniping at each other. And then Bigelow, at the same time as that, finds himself, he gets to be a contractor for the ATIP program, where he's analyzing UFO cases for the United States military. By the way, at the same time, the Obama White House answered a petition organized by Steve Bassett, in which they said, there's no evidence that UFOs are extraterrestrial. We have no interest in this. Yeah, they're studying UFOs at the exact same time. Anyway, typical. So that's Skinwalker Ranch, a fascinating place. I don't know what's going on with Skinwalker now. Bigelow sold it, and I actually don't know what's going on with the property these days.
I'm just laughing because of
I did a rant. I just did a rant.
You just did do a rant. By the way, that's something I do all the time for our member site. Richard, these rants, if you've ever been to a conference, there's always people hovering around the table. There's always a huge group. And once in a while, people will get Richard off on this huge rant.
It's not hard to do.
It's not hard to do. Sometimes it will happen after a lecture.
It's a little scary.
There till midnight one night.
Yeah.
The lecture ended at 9. One of Richard's rants was going. So anyhow, I try to record these now. We'll be having breakfast.
It's a little embarrassing.
You think we're talking about this stuff all the time. So yeah, we'll be in the middle of breakfast. I'll stop him and then I'll record him.
I have to start over.
This is some of the stuff that we put up on the members
while
site.
I'm chewing my eggs.
Yeah.
Dropping the fork. But yeah,
That's
doing
true.
my riff on whatever it is she wants me to talk about, whether it's everything from UFOs to Trump to the deep state to whatever.
Yeah, abductions.
Abductions. Yeah.
And I love sci-fi. So, we're talking about Men in Black, and I'm thinking about Fringe, and I'm thinking about the Adjustment Bureau, and I'm thinking about, so I'm always trying to bring in these concepts from all of these shows and explore them. It's just a fun thing that we do.
And I'm like, yeah, that's really cool for sci-fi. Now let's see if it's really the case.
Yeah,
So
but I mean, come on, it's a fun mental exploration no matter what, right?
Absolutely. We have good conversations. And yes, it's true. Tracy will often record them now.
Yeah.
We'll be driving and I'm just like, I'm doing my thing. And she's like, stop. Gets out the phone and records. And I'm like, okay, I got to back up.
Yeah. Because
And
I know
we'll do it.
other people would like to have this too. So this was just funny because Michael just put in his 2 cents. He said, hell yes. Someone said, George Knapp, Rob Bigelow, Rich Dolan roundtable. How do we make it happen?
Oh, I would love that. Well,
wouldn't that be great?
it would be great. George Knapp and George and I got some kind of bro thing happening. Like we really get along extremely well. every time I see George, I'm just always glad to see him. And I think we just have a very good connection. I think our minds work very similarly when it comes to the UFO subject and just life. I've always found that way. I would love to have an opportunity to chat with Robert Bigelow. Absolutely would love that. Bigelow is someone I've always had a great deal of respect for in terms of, I'm absolutely convinced that he's deeply thoughtful about the UFO subject. And, you know, he's a military contractor, yes. So what that also means is that to the extent that he does work for them, he is presumably bound by all the secrecy protocols that other people in the military are bound by. So to that extent, he's got to make promises of keeping quiet to work with them, and it's a judgment call, and you can support that or not. But as a person to meet with, I would love to meet with him. And I thought his interview on CNN a little over a year ago was very brave. 60 Minutes, not CNN. 60 Minutes,
60
where
Minutes.
he talked very openly about the reality of UFOs. And he's like, if you don't want to get on board with it, it's not my problem. You're missing out. And I think he's totally right. So I'm glad that there's people like him who are forthright about the reality of this subject. We need more, not less of that. And that's what really all of us can do. Like one of the most important things I feel that we can all do in terms of having a real impact with this subject, whether you're a researcher or not, whether you put yourself in the public limelight or not. Like the one thing that we can all do is be brave in our personal life and talk about this subject to the extent that it makes sense for you to do so. All right. I'm not saying go out there with a picket sign and say UFOs are real, but you can be knowledgeable about the subject. You can not shy away from it when it comes up. And when you get that quizzical look from someone where they cock their head at you and wonder, you can then have the opportunity to say, look, it's not even what my opinion is. I've learned that the United States government for a long period of time through declassified documents has actually been really interested in this subject. And once I learned that, I'd like to know why. What is going on with this phenomenon? There's been a lot of serious-minded people who've been into it. You know, the way that you talk about it, like there's opportunities for every one of us to switch on light bulbs over other people's heads. And you think about this. Think about like a little social graph of all like the people that you meet and all the people that they meet and all the people that those people meet, right? It goes on like your net social effect could be thousands of people, just by you being you, just by you being brave and being an inspiration to other people around you. You inspire others who in turn inspire others and so on. It's kind of like paying it forward, but we can do that with this subject. That's how any cultural change happens. It happens by people who just are tired of like hovering and skulking and being afraid. And they just stand up and they say, you know what? This is real. It's real. And what I've discovered in my life, like in talking about this now for 25 years, and it's funny, in this very room, years ago, it was a different room, and I would occasionally have customers up in this room. I had a desk over there, right where that couch is. And when I was first researching UFOs, like in the late 90s, I would have customers to do professional resumes for, and they would be in this very room. And in that initial period, for the first year, I wouldn't tell anyone that I was researching UFOs. I thought, my God, they can't know, right?
Right.
I got to a point where I realized I couldn't really hide this forever because I had stacks of UFO books everywhere. People were going to see them. I was like, okay, fine, let's just get out with it. And I started telling people. This is before I published any books. I was just like, I wasn't known, but I was talking about the subject in a certain way. And I noticed like 9 out of 10 people, even back then, were into it. Like they wanted to know. There was this hunger that they had identified it right away. And I thought, you know what? This is what it's about. Like, this opportunity exists for anyone who's willing to stand up there, be brave, and talk about this. And other people want to hear it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times they do too. You know, I had an organization in university recently, and I found that a lot of people want to talk about it as well. But I do want to say that, you know, it's one thing when you have this conversation with people, because as we all know, you're a historian, you wrote books on this. You know, I've heard him a million times, people on the plane, what do you do? And he'll come right out, but he can ramble off, you know, the top 10 reasons, the top 10 cases. And you know, people are just in the palm of his hands, of course, because, you know, he's got all this knowledge. So I just want to say that I've been encouraging, and Richard has been intending to do this. I've been saying we should have a video out there that's 10 minutes long.
Oh, yes.
That basically is giving people sort of the top 5 tightest reasons that people should open to this possibility.
Yeah, many years ago, I did a video called The UFO Cover-Up in 10 Minutes. And it's on a YouTube channel, and it's, I like it, but I think I could actually do a better one.
Yeah.
I could do a better one now.
Because, I mean, even for myself, you know, I have several relatives, I'm sure everybody does, that, you know, they're not into this and they think it's crazy. And even though the New York Times article came out, I don't think that's going to convince them. So I think Richard could help everybody out, and people would be more brave if they sort of had that quick dialogue to default to, you know, of the rock solid documents that are there. So let's do it.
We will do that. I want to redo that, and that'll be a project this year. In fact, I've in my mind, I've got a series of these videos that I want to do. But and thanks, it was very nice of you to say that about me. But I think anyone can be an inspiration. I think anyone can do it. You don't have to be an encyclopedia about the subject. You can just have a couple of good ideas. You can have one good idea. One good idea. It's fine. And have integrity. And don't let like the snickers and the, you know, ridicule or the jokes affect you. There's an old statement by one of my favorite human beings of all time, the late Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. Read his meditations. Seriously, read the meditations of Marcus Aurelius. One thing he says is, what are you worried about, you know, what other people think about you? Most people don't even know themselves, much less you. Why are you worried about those opinions? And it's really words to live by. It doesn't mean that you should just dismiss other people and blow them off, but don't take opposition to heart. I mean, everyone's been wrong about all kinds of things throughout their entire life. I've been wrong about all kinds of things in my life. I've always said I like to reserve the right to be wrong in the future, because that's what being human is. So if someone wants to disagree with you, don't worry about it. It's just a disagreement, not a big deal. Meanwhile, approach what you do with passion, with commitment, with integrity, and you will turn on a lot of light bulbs, and you yourself will become a real force. And that's what it's about. I think that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm. I think people are talking about it more in general too, which is...
I think there's a definite cultural sea change that's happening. And for a long time, I was very hesitant to kind of state this, because I didn't know, am I living in a little bubble? Am I just seeing just the UFO people? But no, I think that it really is happening. When I mean UFO people, I mean like us. We're UFO people.
Yeah.
But I think that it is happening on a broader cultural basis. I think YouTube is a big part of it. I think the internet's a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. I think younger generations are more open to it. I mean, that was my experience in university, whereas the professors in academia were definitely, generally speaking, not as kind to it. There were some that were very open, but it was definitely discouraged in the psychology department.
Well, academia.
Not a surprise. Yeah.
Oh, so we'll just go quickly.
Okay, so we'll tell you a story.
Quick story.
Okay.
Because it's getting late.
It is getting late.
This is our record. We're getting, these are longer and longer.
I know. Okay, so I had this organization at University, not too long ago.
Oh, come on, let's just put it out there.
All
University
right.
of South Florida.
St. Petersburg.
At St. Petersburg.
All right. So it was called Big Sisters of Psychology, and I made this as a place where people could explore other topics, so meaningful things. And then I also had one where they could explore dreams, out of bodies, near death, lucid dreams, this type of thing.
In the university, Tracy was the bomb. She was rolling.
Well, they didn't really know what we were talking about at night, so I think that's how I kind of got away with it. And because Richard was visiting me in Florida every month, he would be a surprise guest that would come in, and it was wonderful. The groups we had were wonderful. They were so interested.
Yeah.
They were interested in all the topics, so we would tell them, we would explain remote viewing. From both angles, we would explain. Just
talked about UFOs.
UFOs, they're super into it. So anyhow, what we were going to say, one time it was suggested to me to actually formally bring Richard in. So we advertised that Richard was coming. He came.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want to, I won't use names, but the head of the psychology department was pacing outside.
He was furious.
The lecture. And they were very upset.
The entire department, because the psychology department thought that they somehow controlled Tracy's club, which they didn't. It was ridiculous. Just typical academic petty nonsense. So the whole department was like, oh my God, we're going to lose our credibility by having this UFO guy come to speak on behalf of this club. Absolute foolery on their part. Short-sighted, but it's typical. It's typical of the academic mindset.
It is. And, there's a lot of factors. We all know people, they're trying to save face in their own department, whatever. So, and they're good people, I'm sure, but,
small-minded.
They're not open to this. But the sad thing was all of the students were, and obviously people are going to come if they're interested. People who aren't going to come. But there was a lot of interest, obviously. So anyways, just a little story there. What was going on. But quick thing. Another person asked, I know, Melissa, I saw you ask this.
We're going to probably have to wrap this up.
I know.
Right?
So have you ever had any experiences? We did talk about this a little bit last week.
Oh, are they asking me?
With aliens or other?
Well, I had a UFO sighting. I've talked about my UFO sighting enough. Do I really need to get into that here? Saw a UFO twice.
It's in the last video.
Yeah, I saw it with my son. I've talked about that 100 times. It was interesting. It was almost 20 years ago, and was an object that just disappeared the moment I looked away from it. On another occasion, I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we looked up and saw a UFO, and this object zoomed across the sky right here in Rochester, New York. They're everywhere. I don't know what that was, but it was very odd. I've had some night vision experiences, once with Tracy. Once? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Once with Jimmy Church, I saw a very odd thing. And, but no, experiences, like if you're thinking experiences, I don't think that I've had anything like that at all. I have no memory of such things. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay. One last thing here. Mr. Dolan, a few months ago, you entered your show on KGRA talking about heroes and personal heroes, but have since deleted it. Where can I hear that again?
I didn't think I deleted it.
You were doing a fourth segment where you would talk about that sometimes. I don't know if you did a whole show about that. It must have been a segment. Do you want to just talk about your personal heroes really quick?
I would like to redo something like that again, because I love talking about heroes. I believe in heroes, like real heroes. And I believe that it's good to have role models of people who achieve really brave and great and beautiful things that make this world a better place. You want to talk about hero worship, that's a good thing to do. Because, people like that, if they're people of integrity and if they work hard, they're inspirations for the rest of us. The whole point is to make this world better. And not just because you want the world out there to be better. You do, hopefully, but you want yourself to be better. I mean, the real struggle in this life is, we're born into whatever situation we're thrown into. It's like you're dropped into this little boat. The boat is Some people have really good boats where they have someone who's doing the paddling for them. Most people don't. And most people don't know how to navigate. Some people crash onto the rocks. And some people, but here's the thing. I often think, if you do nothing at all, that river is going to take you somewhere. But isn't it better to do your own navigation? But back to heroes. I think, you know, we want inspirations and role models because ultimately we want to make ourselves into more than what we are. One of the most intelligent things I ever read from any UFO writer was from John Mack, where he talked about the process of shedding, the process of personal growth, he said, was the process of shedding the illusions that we are enveloped in. And that process is painful because we want to hang on to those illusions. But it's only in shedding them and in liberating ourselves from those shackles that we actually achieve true growth and become what our destiny could have us become. And by the way, I believe in destiny. I believe in it. And I think that everyone's got one. And most of us, probably all of us, never really achieve it fully. But we can all achieve more of it. And we do it by listening. You know, you got to listen. It's like there's so much noise in the world around us. We were just talking about this recently, like the ancient world had no light pollution, no noise. We have noise around us all the time now. And I really feel there's this voice inside you. It's there. Maybe it's your soul. Maybe it's your inner, the Greeks called it the daimon, that inner spirit that inspires you. And it's easy not to hear it, but you've got it and you have to believe in it. And one thing I like to tell young people, but really this go for anyone, is if you find something that you believe in, like part of your job is to realize that all of your friends and all of your family are going to find 100 reasons for you not to pursue that important dream that you have. But if you've really thought it out, and please do think it out, but if you've thought it through and you believe in it, like your job is not to let those other people stop you, because there's only one person that you really have to answer to, that's yourself, because you're the only person who you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. It's just you. You come in alone and you're going to check out alone, and you have to be satisfied with the choices you make in your life. And think about how tragic it is for so many people in their 20s and 30s, and they throw away these dreams that they had, the fire that burned inside them. One day, if that fire doesn't get put to good use, it turns into ashes, and that's all that's left. By the time you're 40 or 50, that could be all that's left inside you, is just ashes. And what a tragedy that is. So you can't let other people stop you from pursuing what you know is that inner voice inside you telling you to do. Unless that inner voice is telling you to do something really creepy and weird, then think it through. Think it through. But I think
What a
basically,
okay.
well, sometimes there's some people, like, you don't really want them to follow their dream. Let's just get real here. But I think basically you want to think through and listen to yourself. Listen to your higher self. There is a higher self. That's not really a talk about heroes, so I'll come back to that. And this is why she records me, because I just bounce.
Yeah,
I just bounce.
you will.
But it's fun.
As we know, but
All right.
it's always good. So I think it's time to wrap up. I just want to thank Joshua for your super chat. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody. Such great conversation going on in there. Really wonderful questions. We have a running list of them. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, but obviously Richard likes to give thorough answers, so I do my best to pick them out. Want to tell you guys, if you enjoyed this and you want to support Richard's work and you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. You'll also, there's a little bell beside it for notifications if you haven't done that, and you will get alerts when his new videos come out. And like the video, if you enjoy this, it helps support Richard if you like the video. So
thank you. Yeah.
You want to tell them about your websites, your two websites, and what's the difference between the two?
Well, yeah, one is richarddolanpress.com. One is richarddolanmembers.com. The Richard Dolan Press I've had for a very long time, and it publishes all of the books that I publish, my books and books by some very fascinating authors. So I would encourage you to go to Richard Dolan Press, just take a look and see what's there. There is a new book that is up there this week. You can go take a look at that. Lots of articles I've written, particularly in years past, but good ones, I think interesting ones. And then Richard Dolan Members is where we are really doing a lot of new work. I'm working every single day on that site. It feels like creating new content. And that's richarddolanmembers.com. It really, it's turned out to be a far more worthwhile and enjoyable experience than I think either of us would have predicted.
Yeah,
so
yeah, we really love doing it. And
there's a lot of content there.
There is, and I'm trying to capture him all the time for you guys. So there is free content, as we usually say. There's free content on that site as well. It's not always completely up to date, but you can get anything that's not there is on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And other than that, we have lots of members content, and the calendar or the events tab is free for everyone to look at. And I saw again in this time people asking when we would be in UK, and we mentioned that last time. We'll mention it again. It looks like we're going to be in Manchester the last week of June. It's not solid and confirmed, but this is what
working on it.
We are working on. So.
Anything I think we have to wrap it up.
I think so.
We got to call this.
And again, just want to thank everyone for being here. It was wonderful having you all. We want to thank Lori and Michael. They are just amazing. They're providing you with links. They're keeping all of your questions for us. They're hosting the whole chat. And we just couldn't do it without them. Just want to thank them so much.
No. Yeah, thank you guys. All right.
That's it.
Well, so ends Intelligent Disclosure, episode 5. Yes. The double-edged sword of disclosure. We'll be back. By the way, so this was a Tuesday night one where we did this because we wanted to see if the later hour would work better. And we wanted to try out Tuesday. So we'll all have a little conference about this and decide. And somehow we'll get the word out as to what the regular schedule for this show will be. There will be a regular date and time, and it might be this Tuesday at 9, or it may be something else, but we'll settle on something very soon, I'm sure.
Yeah. If you prefer this time, throw it down in the chat so we know if you think this is a better time, and you can weigh in on that. But thank you so much once again for joining us. We loved being here.
Thank you, everybody, and good night. We'll talk again. Bye.
Bye.
Well, I'm trying to end this, and it just keeps going.